Today we geek out about Albedo. Hey guys, what's going on? This is Lee with Geek City USA here, and today we're going to talk about a game called Albedo. Now, Albedo is a game that's currently on Kickstarter with its second edition, and it's a deck building space combat kind of game that has elements to me of a war game, but I'll talk about that more later on. So go ahead, I'll take you over here and give you an overview briefly of how the game is played, and I'll come back and I'll give you my thoughts on the game. All right, this is Albedo. Now, this is the first edition of Albedo, and currently on Kickstarter is a second edition, which the art of the game has changed somewhat. So actually, the art is the same, but the layout on the cards is a little bit different. The art's a little bit more zoomed in, and the cards look a little more refined. So if you notice a difference, don't freak out. Same game, just a little bit different art on the new edition. Now in Albedo, each player is going to be vying for the most victory points, and you do so by attacking different planets, and each planet has 3 different locations that you can go to. This one would get you victory points. Typically the lower left is going to get you new cards, and the lower right will generally give you either an option for new cards or to discard some of the cards in your hand. And if you have cards in your hand that you discard, you take them actually out of the game, and they are worth 1 victory point at the end of the game. And that helps to thin your deck of the starter cards to make room for the more powerful ones. So on a turn, each player is going to deal out 6 cards. And we'll do that for both players here. 3, 4, 5, 6. And they're going to look at the cards, and they're going to determine where they want to go and how they want to use each card. So if you look here, the infantry cards, you have 2 icons. You have the spaceship, which is for space travel, and the tanks are for ground combat. You notice infantry is only used for ground combat. So your space travel is basically your priority order. So if you send, for example, if you send this stack of cards to this planet and your opponent sends, we'll just randomly pick this stack, you would compare them and you would see, okay, who has the most space travel? Well, in this case it's a tie, but let's say your opponent did this. Your opponent has 3 space travel, you have 4 rather, so you would get first pick over where you go on this planet. So the key there is you'd be able to go at the victory points and your opponent wouldn't be able to. Because if you look here, these numbers in the circles, this 1, 1, and 8, that's how many people can visit that part of the planet. So if you win the space combat portion, you get first pick of where you go. So you could say, I'm going to go here to try to get the victory points, and the other players would go from there. So in this case, let's say that this is what this player sent. They have their 4 space combat, which gets them where they're going, and the 2 ground combat, you would be able to say, okay, well, I can put my 2 ground combat here, which would give me 2 victory points. So I would flip the card over to the 2 victory point side, and this would go in front of me, just so that way I know that I got 2 victory points from that. Now, your opponents would then get to pick the next place where they go on that planet. So in this case, you have, they would have 3 ground combat, so they wouldn't be able to go here, so they can go here and either trade in 2 to get, to discard a card in their hand, or maybe if you see this icon here, I would be able to take one of these heavy fighter cards. And what the heavy fighter cards, as you can see, is they have a better space combat, or if you do the optional loadout, they still have a higher space combat while having ground combat. Now each player is going to secretly plan out where they're going. So what you would do is you would look at your cards, determine your loadouts based on the planets that are up there, and you would say, okay, and this is all secret information, you're going to say, I'm going to send this like this over to planet 1, and I'm going to send these 2 like this over to planet 2. And then you would just set that there, and you would reveal it together. So your opponent's going to do the same thing with their cards. So let's say they just really want something at planet 1, so they could put everything under planet 1 if they wanted to, and nothing under planet 2, or vice versa, they could do this. So at which point then, everybody's going to reveal, because you're going to select everything simultaneously. So planet 1, oh, player 2's not going to planet 1, but player 1's going there with this much. And then when you do the second planet, you reveal and you say, okay, here's what each player is doing, and you determine who gets priority from which section that they go to. So you're going to continue to play. Let me clean up all these cards here. You'll continue to go through the planets each turn. until you get to the final 2 planets, at which point you're always going to have as the last planet. This is always the last planet. And if you notice here, this has more victory point possibilities. You can actually get a total of 9 here. And also, every one of these other locations have options for getting rid of cards. So you'll be able to gain last minute victory points. So this is kind of there's a lot of fighting on the last turn to either get the victory points here, but hey, it's not so bad because you can always get rid of cards in your hand. So in a nutshell, that is how Albedo plays. It's very much a deck builder, but it also has elements to me of a war game. I don't know why I feel war game-ish when I play this. Maybe it's just the strategy and picking the loadouts, but I think the ground combat elements and being able to determine what your cards are going to do. There's a lot of strategy to this, but it's also really easy to pick up. So you can really kill yourself on the strategy if you want to, or play it casually and as a deck builder and kind of do the best that you can and get in the most points. So again, that's Albedo, and I'll take you back up top and I'll let you know my thoughts on the game. That was Albedo. So first of all, let's talk about the components. Now, the components that you saw there were for the first edition of the game. Now, the art, or really the card layout, has been a little more refined for the second edition, and I definitely like the improvements. I feel like the second edition, just the way the cards are laid out, they're a little more visually appealing. Nothing against the card art from the first edition. It was very functional, but I just think the second edition helps make the art pop overall. I definitely think it's more pleasing to the eye. Now, the card quality was fine, no complaints there. So if the second edition is anything like the first edition, I think the card quality will be perfect for the game. So on to the gameplay of the game. So Albedo is a deck builder at its core, but it's a very unique take on the genre because not only are you, building your deck as you would a normal deck builder, but there's also a space combat portion of the game. And I said it in the intro, but it very much to me felt like a war game because you're having to plan how you're going to use those cards. There's a lot of additional strategy. It's not just as simple as like a typical deck builder. You're going to play your monster or your spell or your character to do damage to your opponent, but you have to plan how you're going to use each of your cards. Do you want your ships to be used more for the space combat to get you priority on the planets, maybe get victory points, or do you want to flip it to be more ground combat focused? And I thought that added a very unique twist to the genre. Again, it felt very wargamey to me a little bit. I think just because of the strategy piece. Maybe wargame's a poor choice of words, more strategy game based. And it was definitely a welcome take on the whole genre as a whole. And I also appreciated the fact that when you got rid of cards from your hand or from your deck, which typically you do this in a deck builder to strengthen your deck up, maybe make your deck run a little bit better, a little bit quicker. When you get that part of a planet that allows you to get rid of a card, you actually use those for additional points. And I thought that was a very interesting take on the mechanic, because not only did that help to get you points, but it could help you you might want to make a strategic move to get rid of some cards to help you play catch up. So overall, I definitely enjoyed the gameplay. The gameplay is very quick. Everybody's making their selections at the same time. So whether you're playing with 2 players or 4 players, it's always going to play the same duration. And I thought that was great. So it's not one of those games that with more players, it takes you longer to play. And that was refreshing as well. I've played it up from 2 to 4 players. This game plays up to 8 if you have 2 decks. I would be really interested to see the dynamic of a gameplay. Maybe not a full 8 people. I think that might, for me anyway, I think a lot of times you get past 6, it might bog a game down, but I don't know. Maybe this continues to move super smooth as far as gameplay goes. But overall, gameplay I was very pleased with. Now, for the audience of this game, it's definitely going to appeal to the science fiction fans or the strategy and deck building fans. And I think it's a game that's probably more towards mid-weight to heavyweight game player. Not to say that it's a heavy game by any means, but there is a lot of strategy involved. It's not just simple deck building like your Star Realms and such. There's more meat on the bone to it. I think casual gamers could get into it and could potentially enjoy it. I don't know if it would be a match for the lighter gamers. I think there's maybe too many options, too much strategy and planning involved for that. But I think, again, if you're a science fiction fan and anything from a medium weight on up, I think you will definitely be attracted to this game. This is definitely the audience that it's intended for.
So as for the replayability factor of the game, because you're only dealing some of the planets each game and they're going to come out randomly, as well as the fact that you never know what your hand's going to be when you deal it up and what cards you might add based on your play and your opponent's play, I think there's a high replayability here. I think deck builders in general are pretty replayable, and Albedo is no exception to the rule. It's a game that once you play once and you have the rules down, it's real easy to get to the table again. It plays fairly quick, and it makes for an enjoyable, replayable experience. So all in all, Albedo is a game that I've really enjoyed playing. I'm very much a fan of deck builder games to begin with, and the science fiction theme is a plus, and you add on that extra layer of strategy to the game, and it's a game that I've thoroughly enjoyed. It's a game that I would recommend to you if you are a fan of deck builders and science fiction, and you like a little bit of strategy on top. I know I keep repeating that aspect of the game, but it very much is a strategic deck builder with elements of war game thrown in. So I liked it. I think if you are a fan of science fiction and deck builders, you should definitely check it out, and maybe it's one that you will like as well. All right, guys, that's it. I'm Lee with Geek City USA. Thanks for hanging out with us. Let me know in the comments down below your thoughts on the game, if you've played it, or what your opinions are of the game based upon the Kickstarter or what have you. Be sure to like and subscribe to our channel. Check us out on Facebook, on Instagram, on Twitter, and interact with us. We'd love to get to know you guys and look forward to chatting with you guys in the future. So once again, thanks for hanging out. We'll see you next time.